You guys know who it is, and you don't want to wait, so let's recap. But be sure you stick to the very end of this video. When we last left off, it was a big case of hospital blues for our heroes returning from the Tsunade retrieval mission. With the process of healing started, happiness, hope, and excitement sprang forth though. And a decision about the future of the village was made, and Jiraiya's destiny was forever changed. He and Naruto had a squabble, and they decided it was best to embark on a training trip to gear up for the upcoming challenges. And we return to this story now. The week before the date that Jiraiya had set as Naruto's and his own departure into the world to once again resume their training for the coming threats, and per Naruto's insistence, warn the other Jinchuriki of that same threat. When Jiraiya had informed heroes of the detours they planned to make on their trip, the old Kage was a bit shocked, but partly impressed at the inherent kindness of the deed. With this in mind, he tells Jiraiya that he will send ahead correspondence to the other four nations. The Kage had already been informed, with the threat posed by the Akatsuki, it may be time for a 5 Kage summit. But first, the correspondence, because some kind of introduction before rolling up to random Jinchuriki and telling them an international terrorist group made of some of the world's best ninja wanted the magical kaiju in their stomachs. It just generally wasn't something one expected to hear. Here's instead about writing these messages and sent them off by way of his fastest hawks. It would be less than a day before a back and forth was established between the 5 villages as decisions had to be made. For every village's Jinchuriki to be warned of the oncoming threat directly, their identities would have had to been revealed. And while it was possible that the villages themselves could just relay the warning to their Jinchuriki, Hiruzen was introducing this as a gesture of good faith towards every village. That was what this goal was for Naruto, and he saw no reason to bog it down with unnecessary politics. For this reason, a few of the replies could be considered strange. The stone simply sent the correspondence directly back to the leaf. The cloud had a famous Jinchuriki, and it's arguable that Yukito would have also been well known throughout the world. Remember, the Hokage and Jinchuriki in the cloud are pretty much revered as heroes, so there's no reason for them to hide that information. Beyond that, can you imagine how much a bored B would want to meet Naruto? Or how gung-ho A would have been for an easy way to stop an oncoming threat? So of course, they agreed to host Naruto and Jiraiya. The Sand had already had his Jinchuriki revealed and warned, and Gaara had already decided he wanted to keep moving down this new path his encounters in the leaf had opened up to him, meaning he had to improve as well. And finally, the Hidden Mist had accepted his correspondence, but no reply was ever sent. With no word from the stone or mist, Hiruzen decides to relay this information to Jiraiya, who he felt could best decide what to do next. And he decides to tell Naruto later to allow him to best enjoy his time before their departure. Speaking of, with his tenant, the blonde Jinchuriki was the first of the rookies to be released from the hospital, followed by Shikamaru. Lee's hands were severe enough that Tsunade wanted to force him to take it easy a bit longer, and Sasuke's chakra exhaustion and wounds were healing much slower than Naruto's had. So he was also forced to stay in the care of the hospital. This left Naruto with very little choice for who he'd spend his time with before it was time for him to leave the village for a while. Sakura, one of his best friends, was available most days, but she spent most of her time cooped up in the hospital to keep Sasuke and Lee company. It wasn't that he didn't want to hang out with them, but the hospital was far too stuffy and cramped, with the nurses and hospital staff discouraging any kind of roughhousing or loud noises. He was all about both those things. It wasn't fair. This opened up the rare opportunity of Naruto being by himself when inside the village. Sakura and Ino were spending more and more time in the hospital, not just doting over Sasuke, but bringing Choji treats as well, and even bringing Akamaru bones once in a while to irritate Kiba and not getting anything himself. Though Shikamaru was out, he was usually spending his time with Ino around the recovering Choji. The one time he hadn't spent his day that way was when he had his game with Shogi with Naruto, with the blonde failing each time to defeat him. He would continue to challenge him though, grumbling that he'd never surrender. Finally, he'd managed to get lucky when Shikamaru fell asleep during a game. In a nice surprise, Ken had actually hung around them during a few of their games. Naruto was happy to have her. She had no real friends or familiar relationships in the village. According to Jiraiya, the girl had been placed under a temporary guardianship of one of the interrogation corps and had to live with them as probation to deem her not a threat or double agent. But by the 12th game of Naruto losing pitifully, she had found a good reason to go and had left to watch something much more interesting. In terms of other options, the members of Team 8 other than Shino were still total strangers mostly, and Shino himself somewhat creeped him out, even though it was respectful fear. The same kind you'd give any eccentric, yet dangerous shinobi. And speaking of all the interesting older shinobi, they were all either in the hospital themselves or busy. Thankfully, there was a group of people he found himself able to enjoy his time with. The also soon to depart Genin team from the Sand Village. He had long since gotten past his unease with Gaara, but hugging it out in front of entire arenas of people would do that to you. And he was now enjoying helping the other Jinchuriki express and find himself without the use of murder or sand. He ended up taking an interest in the plants that he and Jiraiya grew in their apartment, so there was a start. He'd even been introduced to the KobzArt himself by Tamari, with the preface, "This is the guy responsible for Gaara." He'd found it strange at the time, but took some pride in it. But for some reason, he didn't like the guy. But Naruto admitted to himself that the Kazekage seemed the type to put on a much colder face than their heart truly spoke of. He'd soon informed Naruto and his children that the day of their departure was soon at hand, as it matched the day that Naruto and Jiraiya had set to leave the village. Relaying this to Ino and Sakura the next morning while walking to the hospital, it is decided by the three that a party should be held. It could celebrate everyone being discharged from the hospital with a clean bill of health, especially Choji and the Sand Ninja going home, as they've been a big help, and it'd be a nice thank you to them. Soon, the rookies of two villages would find themselves stuffed in the local barbecue joint of the Leaf Village. Naruto's suggestion for ramen had been shut down due to the local stand not being great for large groups, and so he'd have to settle. The night was very enjoyable, and more than a few of the jonin of the teams had shown themselves as well. Kunai, for instance, had felt it appropriate to chaperone the youngsters, and Guy had agreed with her. Thankfully, he was also able to stop Lee from drinking something that could have been very bad apparently. But Naruto was never sure what was in the bottle. He and Sasuke had a contest to see who could eat more, something he was happy to see, as it seemed his best friend smiled less and less since they fought his brother. Lee and Choji had happily joined in on the contest. It wasn't long before everyone but Yakimichi were puking, and the restaurant was noisy with the sounds of their angry and disgusted companions. The party was fun. Elsewhere, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Hiruzen found themselves enjoying a drink in the Hokage's office. The old man surprised him by breaking out a bottle of sake with the claim of he's retiring. He could do what he wanted to. And the three once again fell into a pleasant dynamic of nostalgia, reliving their younger days and envisioning the now old Kage as their young sensei while they had been brats. Jiraiya, for one, was curious when his face would be added to the Hokage monument, and also wanted to leave Hiruzen a list of details that had to be done correctly, or else he would not take the job. Tsunade, on the other hand, had no end of criticisms for her old master, and the state he'd allowed the Leaf Village's medical corps to fall in. With so many shinobi injured in the mission to save her, she'd been pushed pretty hard to treat them all, even with the aid of Shizune. The old man coolly replied that the skill of the Medic Ninja Corps would likely be higher if the village's best Medic Ninja were actually in the village. That gave the Senju woman pause over her complaints, as the old man had a point, and this made her think. She was by no means 100% on board with returning to the village just yet, but the memories of her loved ones had recently stopped being focused solely on the negative and painful, and more on the positive and love-filled good times. Seeing Jiraiya again, and so mature and responsible enough to have raised a child, had made her proud of him, and somewhat ashamed of herself. Neither Dan nor Naga could be very happy with her current lifestyle, knowing she could be helping people. And moreover, Jiraiya, who'd stirred these feelings, was about to go on to complete her loved one's dream. She felt an urge to be there alongside him to help him if he stumbled, but she at least wanted to settle her debts and see how she felt after that. If these feelings remained or had gotten stronger, she returned to the village. This, of course, is kept to herself. Interrupting, a tapping on the window would have it open to reveal Kakashi. He arrived with a bit of a nervous sweat as Anko accompanied him with a plate of dango. Nervously, he apologizes, but he couldn't persuade her to stop following him. Hiruzen quietly noticed that he didn't seem to be trying too hard to get her to go, but he kept that to himself. Kakashi explains his reason for being here as wanting to come and speak to the Toad Sage about a few things. With knowledge of him soon leaving, he number one wanted to thank Jiraiya for the trust he'd placed in him with allowing him to raise Naruto these past months. And beyond that, he also wanted to ask him why he and the Hokage had chosen him for the replacement as the head of Jiraiya's information network. He didn't seem worthy for a job once held by Asani. Jiraiya thanks Kakashi in return, reminding that it was under him that Naruto's cocky ideology had finally faltered. He then reiterated the same points that his sensei had made for Kakashi in the first place, and finishes by saying that Kakashi is already a formidable jonin, and that he wouldn't have to take the position for at least another 2 years. So, if he felt weak or inadequate, then he should train for more than just staying in shape. Looking his former student up and down, and once again considering his teacher's words about Kakashi being much like Minato and himself, he made a suggestion. Kakashi should attempt to learn Sage Mode from the ninja hounds he summoned. They were much like Lord Fukasaku and Lady Shima, so it was likely possible they could work together if he underwent the training. Nervously, Kakashi explains that he isn't so sure the hounds even know anything about Sage Jutsus, and he'd be scared to experiment and end up making a big mistake. Jiraiya nods, accepting that as a good point, but grumbles that it would have been pretty badass. Instead, he snaps a finger and points to Kakashi's covered eye. He advises him to pursue doing more with that eye of his. He still had a so-called genius Uchiha under his charge that possessed those very same eyes. Surely the two could work together to discover a new, deeper mastery over it and a much deeper power in it. Kakashi quietly and thoughtfully considers everything and nods. Jiraiya was sure he thought of the same option, but likely needed the boost of encouragement if he was doubting himself on his new role. He soon excused himself and absolutely followed Anko out of the office. Realizing he'd also have to wake up early, Jiraiya decides to call it a night as well. He and Naruto will leave with the Kazekage's caravan and diverging outside the Leaf tomorrow. He waved goodbye to both his former teammate and master and left for his apartment. The next morning was one Naruto had dreaded. His bags are already packed and there was no point in stalling. Soon, he'd be standing outside the door to his apartment with Jiraiya locking it up. The man sighs and looks over to his son, ruffling his hair, as they made their way out of the building. It did hurt to see Naruto so glum, but they both knew this was just for the best. And it hadn't taken long before he'd seen the boy's head raise high and his shoulders square up, as he walked forward with the purpose.
Thinking about the other Jinchuriki in danger, probably,
Jiraiya thought with another proud smile. Once they had reached the village gates, which were swarmed with the caravan of sand ninja preparing to depart, they were just about to leave when the 3rd and Team 7 arrived at the gates, along with the likes of Ino, Lee, and Ken. Even a young boy that the 3rd introduced as his grandson would be in attendance. He explains that he's a very big fan of Team 7 from the showing at the tuning exams. This was actually one of the first times that Naruto had spoken to Hiruzen outside of his office, and the only thing he had to say was asking him why he chose Jiraiya as successor. The father was sure to let the boy have an earful about the dig at him. Naruto shook Kakashi's hand and thanked him for being his sensei. Since his dad was his dad, it was a role that wasn't filled in his life. It made the silver-haired Jonin feel nice to be revered like that. He shared a hug with Sakura, who promised that she would not slack off on his training. He also got one from Ino's. Hers included a kiss on the cheek that nearly sent him soaring. A fist bump with Lee, and a promise to spar when he returned to the village was made. And a blushing Ken offered him a professional handshake. When he got to Sasuke, he found the boy reading over a scroll in his own handwriting once again. Poetry was all the Uchiha seemed to be doing now. He snarked that his so-called rival better not brood so hard he neglected to train. And without missing a beat, Sasuke quietly told him not to be such an idiot that he got their next Hokage killed in the process. The two glared at each other for a while, before lightening up a bit and smiling. It was just the way the two communicated, and to them, that was just as good as any long-winded goodbye. And so, this was it. The Sand Ninja began to leave the village, and Jiraiya and Naruto followed them. It wasn't long before Naruto made his goodbye to Gaara as their roads diverged as well. He warned his friend to be careful, to make sure he counted on his brother and sister. And of course, him if the situation called for it. They're in the same boat, and Jinchuriki had to stick together. Gaara agreed with this sentiment wholeheartedly, and expressed his desire to see Naruto again soon. And with that, they were gone. Now on their own and away from the village, Jiraiya explained the status of their warnings going to the other villages. Afterwards, Naruto seemed to think, and looked up to declare that they would still be one of the Jinchuriki of the Hidden Mist and the Hidden Stone villages as well. Jiraiya responds that they had no way of finding them, and they'd have to commit international espionage just to get close enough to deliver a warning. Smugly, Naruto concedes on these points, but reveals to Jiraiya that he knows all about the Sage Mode thing he'd been hiding from him, since Guy Sensei just loved bragging about his battle with Orochimaru. His idea was that if Jiraiya could use it and sense chakra, then he could definitely set the Jinchuriki apart from the normal citizens, and other shinobi since they had larger chakra reserves than normal. Admittedly, Jiraiya couldn't fight that logic, and was more surprised the boy had thought of that before he did himself. But then again, this was Naruto's goal, so it made sense that he would. Once again, he felt that pride in knowing his son wanted to do this for the right reasons, and so, decided to agree to this plan. But they'd be training during the trip as well, and he wanted to visit Mount Miyaboku every once in a while to hopefully throw off any trackers if need be. Naruto agrees to his adopted father's ground rules, and with it being the closest, the two set off for the village hidden in the mist. But these meetings are stories for a later date, except for one which we'll get into much earlier. During their travels and training, Jiraiya would hold himself accountable to the promise he'd made to the 3rd Hokage, and not allow Naruto to read from the Scroll of Seals, as the 3rd had deemed it just for the use of the Hokage. Once his son's curiosity had begun getting the best of him, the boy would come to learn the full breadth of Jiraiya's growing skill with sealing jutsus, as he'd rigged a seal on the ink to react with forming a rather detailed photo of his rear whenever a chakra signature that was not his own came to possession of it. This was able to be deactivated, of course, but he found it much too funny to do so, and Naruto had learned to stop sneaking peeks after the 4th time of brushing his eyeballs. Now he'd leave it on just for security means. Aside from skills in the sealing arts growing, he found notes and training tips from the previous Hokage on lots of their techniques, and someone's simple physical training and advanced chakra control techniques. There are 3 of these techniques that most caught his eye, one being that which had cost Minato his life, and burdened Naruto so heavily. He instantly disregarded it as a non-option. The second technique was one of the 3rds. It was a special collaborative transformation technique he'd used with his favorite summon, Enma. It wasn't exactly a regular transformation, but it was by no means extremely complicated. And the reason he had taken a deeper interest in it was for more than just the nostalgia and reverence of the technique. It could be very beneficial to his current toolkit. The transformed summon allowed their body to be wielded by the user, while they remained in a specific form. His thought process being, if that ability could be taken advantage of by the summon to simultaneously gather nature energy in a time of need, then he could possibly have a much more convenient way of going into Sage Mode while in battle. This gave Naruto and he adequate reason to journey to Mount Miyaboku to speak with Fukusaku and ask his opinion on this idea. And I believe the sage would find it a pretty good one to at least attempt. For one, in this timeline he was incredibly proud of Jiraiya when he mastered Sage Mode. The tenacity he showed in training after receiving custody of Naruto was more than he'd ever seen when the man was a boy. And this big change in Jiraiya was partly why Fukasaku, Shima, and most of the Toads accepted Naruto so quickly, and acted as a strange one, but a family nonetheless, and why Fukasaku was willing to go along with Jiraiya's crazy schemes. He does over-explain that he had no intention of practicing this technique with Jiraiya himself. He was a sage of the mountains, and he couldn't afford to be called away constantly or repeatedly over time. He was, however, perfectly happy to train he and any Toad he wanted to partner with for the technique and how to do the shared transformation and absorb nature energy while doing it. And he stresses that the training won't be easy, as the Toad is going to have to be very good at gathering nature energy, and then learn how to balance a ninjutsu on top of that, and hold it constantly. It was very possible, but it took practice, meaning this is something that Jiraiya is going to be working on throughout the entire training trip. His initial choice for a partner is Gamma, the mid-sized Toad he was commonly seen riding. But with a bit of deeper thought, he requests for Gamabunsu to also be taught to gather nature energy. The request surprised Fukasaku, but at Jiraiya's confident grin, he didn't question him why. Naruto's benefits from his training came from multiple places. With Jiraiya being stronger than his canon version already, any sparring between the two would yield Naruto greater gains. And now, that Jiraiya is already stronger and is doing more training. Not to mention, Naruto also found himself with his training in his own hands, for only the second time in his life, as Jiraiya now had a responsibility to devote an adequate amount of time to getting stronger himself. The major difference between this time and the time of the Land of Waves is that Naruto now has the Rasengan mastered, and is now aware of the jutsu being incomplete, and so he took advantage of his free time and began to try to do what his father couldn't without really knowing the true significance of such a goal. But this was to very little success. What this resulted in, however, was Naruto's discovery of his own love of creating ninjutsu, finding many bits of inspiration for techniques through his travels with Jiraiya to different villages and especially from meeting the other Jinchuriki. And learning and creating most things had become a much simpler task with the clone training technique he'd found. He soon discovered himself growing mentally just as he did physically. His feelings with the Jinchuriki, the tail beasts inside them, their treatment, and the world all grew and matured slowly. Soon, he took a bit of pride in feeling like a Jinchuriki revolutionary, and actually set out with the goal to accomplish Jiraiya's dream and find out what to do with all the hate in the world. And after meeting with the Jinchuriki of the Cloud, he found himself with a small desire to make the world a better place for the tailed beasts as well. This later culminated in a deep reflective meditation, a shocking realization, and a small gift from his tenant to help him achieve his goal. There had also been a time when Jiraiya and Fukasaku had expressed interest in Naruto practicing in the sage arts. Admittedly, he was also somewhat interested, especially in the sensory capabilities he and Jiraiya had been taking advantage of to track the Jinchuriki. But he found himself quickly unhappy with the means of training, and he was much more interested in continuing his own creations of techniques. Not to mention, he also had more distractions later on in the training trip. And after receiving the earlier mentioned gift from the Nine Tails, Naruto further distanced himself from learning Sage Mode. Maybe in the future. It was too boring, and squeezing and training in between long bouts of travel made his study even harder. Meanwhile, back in the village, while time passes and Naruto and Jiraiya make their journey and train, those back at home are not sitting still. Sasuke and Kakashi are also training very hard, with the Uchiha recently having picked up the use of a sword and having adapted to begin channeling the cutting power of the lightning blade into it. Something Kakashi was able to help him master extremely quickly. And it wasn't long before Sasuke found himself in the position that he had revealed his Mangekyo Sharingan to Kakashi, and soon, he was helping the man in mastering control over the eye himself. With the aid of an Uchiha, I believe Kakashi could refine his Mangekyo use to a much finer degree than he did in canon. When looking at Obito, we see that he was able to refine his side of the ability to a very precise and finesse level, but Kakashi's up until the war arc is extremely straightforward and simple. And that suggests that this wasn't the case of Kakashi's not being an Uchiha, limiting him significantly. I think this was due to a lack of knowledge and perspective about the Mangekyo. And yes, granted, Obito had the advantage of Hashirama cells, which could have led to a higher proficiency with his eye along with natural Uchiha affinity, but the question here isn't can Kakashi do anything as well or better than Obito, it's can he achieve something better than his canon version did with the aid of Sasuke as he attempts to learn a similar power. And the obvious answer to that question is pretty easily yes. With the help of Sasuke, I believe Kakashi will be able to do more than just long-range Kamui use, with that somewhat long wait time. He discovers a technique that allows him to create small Kamui voids and small orbs around his fingers to transport small amounts of matter to the other dimension. It is a much faster, smaller, and less strainful variant of the full-on Kamui. And like with the lightning blade, there's a certain level of speed needed to make it viable in combat. The only issue with the technique was that it still did take a toll on his eye and chakra reserves, which he'd been sure to increase through constant drainage to near zero in their training. There was also the issue of not being able to physically train the Mangekyo. It was a resource in battle, much less than a tool. Tools were replenishable and repairable. To make up for this, the Mangekyo quote-unquote training consisted of a lot of talking and thinking about what and how the abilities could be applied. As we see in canon, Kakashi and Sasuke tactically and in terms of techniques are some of the brightest in the series, second to only the likes of Itachi really. In lots of their fights, we see both quickly analyze and break down an enemy's techniques and find flaws and weaknesses. This is the basis of how all those awesome team moves in the Storm series will come about. The partners have to have insight on what the other can do, but when they do, they're able to combine techniques and create something much more powerful. This is also somewhat how the Chidori as a technique came about in canon, so history repeats itself. This also led to Kakashi and Sasuke placing strict limitations on their Mangekyo use. Lives had to be in danger to even consider using the eye. And for the first time, Kakashi could understand Guy's plight with his student Lee to a much larger degree. This, coupled to having Sasuke as a sparring partner, had finally allowed Kakashi to once again reach his peak performance level physically, and even grow a bit beyond it. Somewhat sadly, this need to train for his own career, and for Sasuke's, caused Kakashi to somewhat have to neglect the small training rapport that he had gained with Sakura. But this wasn't a massive problem, as the young Kunoichi found a much better suited opportunity for herself. This also meant that Kakashi was forced to slow his time spent with Anko down. He wasn't quite sure what that relationship was, and neither of the two had a large enough amount of faith to believe that they could enjoy a relationship and not have tragedy strike later. Though, Kakashi realized that he was not happy with this arrangement. But by the time he did, he felt it was wrong to express such a thing. As usual, when finishing his training or missions for the day, Sasuke returns to his home, where he once again sits at a windowsill, allowing a crow to fly down and perch on it. Turning its head, his eyes met his red Mangekyo Sharingan, and he was transported into a black and red plane of existence. Across from him stood an Uchiha that looked only a little younger than Itachi had the last time he'd seen him. This was Shisui Uchiha, or at least an illusion of him. The man his brother had long ago been accused of killing, who was actually Itachi's best friend. He was meant to perfectly mimic Shisui, and act as an instructor for Sasuke. It was the source of his recent skill in Kenjutsu, fire-style efficiency, Uchiha-style kunai and shuriken techniques, and his growing understanding of the Sharingan, as well as the man named as Danzo Shimura, whom the Avenger had said is his first target to bring to justice. And he knew just the way to do so. Sadly, the Shisui Genjutsu simulation was very limited and could only respond to certain commands. Touching on the last of Team 7, the training that Sakura benefited from was not hers alone to do so. She found herself going to Kurenai every now and then in an effort to learn more and more about Genjutsu. And these trips ended up intersecting into times when Kurenai would be with Anko or possibly Asuma in Team 10. In fact, it was on one of these occasions that her biggest opportunity made itself clear. The former student of Orochimaru would inform the Kunoichi of Team 10 and 8, as well as Sakura, of an opportunity. Lady Tsunade had decided to return to the village full-time a while ago, and was on the lookout for 3 apprentices. In this timeline, with Tsunade not having the responsibilities of being Hokage, her sole focus is on the Medic Ninja Corps and how to improve it. Anko admitted that she was not very good at the training herself, but having trained her personally, she expected that Sakura with her amazing chakra control would be wonderful at it. And of course, she thought that Ino and Hinata should attempt it as well. While Ino was open to the idea, the Hyuga surprisingly refused the offer, and explained that she had a little time to train with others now. When not on missions or having free time, she was trained with her family and surprisingly, Rock Lee. She does however decide to mention the opportunity to Tenten, who she now saw very frequently due to having a better relationship than Neji, and the 3 of them all received very different results from their training. While I would absolutely love to go into the changes that every single character has faced so far, it would extend this video way too much, and I can do so in a later part much easier. So we skip ahead. 2 years, 5 months, and 3 weeks since their departure from the Leaf Village, we open back up to Jiraiya and a much taller Naruto as they engage in an afternoon sparring session to test the fruits of their training. Afterwards, they'd be returning to the village gates that same day. Off to the side sat a girl with Fukasaku, who moaned in exasperation and asked for the two to please hurry it up and go already. All they did was make ruckus nowadays. After leaving their small training field destroyed, the training partners, a father and son, smile at each other and agree that it is time to go home. Calling out to the girl on the sage, the preparations are made, and the 3 humans are transported to the Leaf Village's gates. With their sudden appearance, Kotetsu is sent off to fetch someone, and it isn't long before Tsunade appears in front of them, yelling at Jiraiya and Naruto for their ragged appearances. In a big rush, she began to usher them towards the Hokage Tower, quickly explaining that the third had decided Jiraiya's coronation was the very night he got back. She and the old man both agreed it was time he took up the position. Before she got too excited at the prospect, she stopped and asked Naruto and Jiraiya who the girl was. Not allowing them to speak for her, she happily chirped that her name was Fu. Hey guys, quick outro here. So first off, thank you all for your support in achieving the video like and Twitter follow goals on part 7. I very, very much appreciate it, and I'm sure you all do too. And if you're just not hearing about these goals or remember hearing about the goals late, let that be a lesson to start watching the videos in their entirety. Watch to the very end. That is a much bigger help to the channel than you probably realize. I'm also happy to announce this series won't be having another like goal for a good while, but there will be more like goals in the future and on different series. The goal with this is to get you guys in the habit of liking videos as soon as they post, because that helps this channel out too. Even if you see a video of a series that you may not be fond of, still drop that like. That video stimulates the memes that are going to bring the videos you want, and with better visuals and better editing. Also, thanks to those of you who understand that to make content isn't that easy and there's work and effort involved, I really do appreciate you. To those of you who are too excited for the next part to be patient, I appreciate your enthusiasm. There were a few script changes that didn't allow it here, but next time, you guys will see what made this wait worth it. So, needless to say, please drop a like on this video, and maybe give it a share on social media and with your friends as well. And go follow me on social media, I'm a pretty fun follow, and give you a version of me that's a lot less worried about getting demonetized. Massive shoutouts to the Plus Ultra fam for being what it is, and last but certainly not least to our amazing patrons. In Hero Tier, Lomba Quaid, Zyra Returns, Streb, and Stefan Consfront, as well as Lee Ferguson. In Beyond Tier, Knuckles OX, Don, and Robert Smith. And in Plus Ultra Tier, DJ the Lazy Gamer. Thank you guys and the members of the channel for sponsoring these videos. With that said, nothing left to do but to tell you guys to take care of yourselves, and as always, go beyond Plus Ultra. See you guys next time.